The late-night visitor. It was one of those nights when everything felt off. You know the kind, too quiet, too still, like the world was holding its breath. Sam was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. The glow of the screen the only light in the room. He'd been up late, again, watching random videos and trying to ignore the creepy creaks of his old apartment. It started around midnight. A knock at the door. Not loud, just a soft tap tap tap. Sam froze. He wasn't expecting anyone, and honestly, who shows up at this hour? He sat up, heart pounding a little faster. "Who's there?" he called, his voice more shaky than he'd like. Silence. Sam grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept toward the door. He peeked through the peephole. Nothing. Just the dimly lit hallway and that weird buzzing sound from the flickering light bulb outside. Maybe it's just the neighbors messing around, he muttered to himself. But something about it didn't sit right. He double-checked the locks and went back to the couch, telling himself to chill out. But then it happened again. Tap, tap, tap. Louder this time. Sam's stomach did a little flip. He grabbed a heavy book off the coffee table. Not the best weapon, but hey, it'd have to do. "Look, I'm not in the mood for games," he shouted, hoping his voice sounded tougher than he felt. Again, nothing. By now, Sam's imagination was running wild. What if it wasn't a prank? What if someone was out there, watching him? He turned on every light in the apartment, checking the windows and making sure they were locked. But as he stood in the kitchen, staring out into the dark street below, he caught movement out of the corner of his eye. A shadow, quick and darting, right past his door. "Nope. Nope, nope, nope," he whispered, backing away. He reached for his phone and dialed his best friend, Mike. The line rang and rang, but no answer. Typical Mike. Then the power went out. The apartment plunged into darkness, and Sam's pulse skyrocketed. He fumbled with his phone, turning on the flashlight again. The beam of light shook as his hands trembled. That's when he heard it, a scraping sound, like metal on wood, coming from the front door. Sam pressed himself against the wall, his breath shallow. The scraping stopped, replaced by a low, guttural whisper. He couldn't make out the words, but it was definitely a voice. His mind screamed at him to do something, anything, but his body felt frozen. Then came the worst sound of all. The lock clicked. The door creaked open, just an inch, and Sam could see a sliver of the hallway. He held his breath, clutching the book like it was a lifeline. "Sam," the voice rasped, low and drawn out. Whoever it was knew his name. That was it. Sam bolted. He sprinted for the bedroom, slamming the door shut and shoving his dresser in front of it. His hands shook as he dialed 911, whispering frantically to the operator about someone breaking in. "Stay on the line," the operator said. "Officers are on their way." But then Sam noticed something that made his blood run cold. His bedroom window, which he was sure he'd locked, was open. Curtains fluttered in the night breeze. And there, on the windowsill, were muddy footprints leading inside. Sam's phone clattered to the floor as a shadow moved in the corner of the room. The last thing he heard before everything went dark was that same, raspy voice, whispering right behind him. "Found you." Sam stayed still. The sound of the muddy footsteps still echoed in his mind, and he knew he couldn't wait any longer. The shadow in the corner of the room seemed to grow, shaping itself as if it were a being of its own. His senses were on high alert, and he didn't know how much longer he could stay hidden. The whisper came again, louder this time, reverberating in the cold room. "You can't escape, Sam." The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, distorted, as if multiple voices merged into one. Sam no longer had time to think. With a muffled scream, he jumped and ran for the window. Without hesitation, he shoved it open with all his strength, feeling the cold breeze invade the room. The ledge was narrow, but he didn't care. In a desperate impulse, he clung to the window frame, attempting to leap outside. It was then that he felt something cold on his leg. A hand, icy, as though it were grabbing his ankle. He struggled, trying to break free, but the pressure intensified. The grip of the hand felt unnatural, relentless. Sam screamed, but the sound was muffled by the darkness surrounding him. He could feel his body being pulled back into the darkness of the room again. With one final effort, he used the last of his strength to break free from the cold hand. He jumped out of the window and landed with a thud on the ground, rolling across the wet grass. The fear still surrounded him like an invisible cloak as he stood up, disoriented, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might explode. Without looking back, Sam ran. He didn't know where he was going, didn't know how to protect himself, but he had to get out. The streetlights were dim, but they offered some direction. He hurried, leaping over the sidewalk, running toward the city center, where the police could finally find him. But what he didn't know was that the shadow was still following him. With each step Sam took, he felt the air grow heavier, as if someone were watching him at every corner, every empty building. He looked over his shoulder, but the street was empty. There was no one. Then he heard it again. The whisper. "You can't escape. I am part of you now." Sam stopped, his heart leaping in his throat. He looked at the empty streets around him, the fear turning into panic. Who are you?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "I am the one who came to find you," the voice answered. "I am the echo of what you forgot, what you left behind." Sam didn't know what that meant, but the words struck him deeply. He turned and started running even faster, not knowing where he was going, but knowing that if he stopped, it would be too late. When he reached the city center, he saw the flashing lights of police vehicles in the distance. He shouted for help, but the sound of his own voice seemed muffled, as if the night had swallowed everything. The police arrived quickly, but when Sam looked back, the street was empty. There was no one behind him, but he felt the presence still there, like a shadow that would never leave him. He was taken to the police car, but the feeling of terror didn't leave. And when he finally looked into the rearview mirror of the police car, he no longer saw his own reflection. Only a silhouette, dark and indistinct, watching him. "I found you," the voice whispered once again, coming from inside his own head. Sam never knew if he was truly free from that night, or if the late-night visitor had finally become part of him. But one thing was certain, the shadow wouldn't let him go so easily. It would always be there, waiting, until he accepted what lurked in the darkness.